Traders, how are you? With Marcello this week, war continues, markets are up, and Biden even confirmed that we're going to have food shortages soon. Food shortages, not food shortages. Let's get going. Markets had their second most positive week consecutively, 2 weeks in a row positive. A lot of investors now are thinking that the markets are going to be able to withstand the whole situation with the war in Russia and Ukraine. And we also have the situation with the Fed's plans to increase interest rates to try to control the surging inflation. Now, remember that the increase in interest rates, it's not good for the economy because it adds an extra cost to buying houses, to taking out debt to start businesses, acquisitions, all kinds of things, right? This is the kind of the interest rate that's set to manage the economy essentially. But at the same time, if they don't raise the interest rates, inflation is even worse because, if you have an increase of, let's say, 0.25 or 1% when it comes to, buying a house, for example, that's a lot worse than an increase of 20, 30, 40, 50%, which is what we're seeing in the increase of food, of energy, of houses. And obviously you can afford much better a 1% raise in purchasing a house than you can spending 50% more on what you spend for food every week, right? Overall markets for the week in the US and Canada, mostly positive. The overseas market news, the war is obviously continuing in Ukraine. That hasn't ended. There were continuing peace talks between Russia's Vladimir Putin and the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, over the weekend. He says that if they don't reach an agreement, that it could be the initiation of World War III. And Ukraine on Monday rejected an ultimatum to surrender the besieged port city of Mariupol to Russian forces. Overall, markets in Europe are mostly mixed, more negative than positive, but they were all mixed. And then Latin American markets were mostly higher, especially Argentina going up over 4%. Africa and the Middle East also mixed, with Egypt exploding more than 9% for the week, the biggest positive of all. And then in the far east, we have the Japanese Nikkei, which went up close to 5%, and Singapore went up over 2%. Singapore now easing the COVID restrictions. So if you want to travel to Singapore and you're vaccinated, you can enter the country officially now. Other than that, Bitcoin and crypto news, and sorry if you can hear the puppies in the background. Bitcoin and crypto news, Warren Buffett is officially quote unquote investing in crypto. He talked a lot of very bad things about crypto, him and Charlie Munger, but they're now putting $1 billion towards a company called NU Holdings, which is a bank that's based out of Brazil, and NU Invest, which is their investment arm, allowing users to invest in crypto ETFs or exchange traded funds. So a lot of people say that it wasn't Warren Buffett's decision to actually invest in this company, but the new up and coming generation that works for him. But at the end of the day, it is a bank that's making money, which obviously is a good thing for Warren Buffett. The year-over-year growth revenue for this company was close to 30%, which might be the reason why he wanted to invest in it. The NFT bubble looks like it officially has popped for now. OpenSea, which is the marketplace which runs more than 90% of the NFT space, has dropped over 72% in daily volume from $250 million down to $70 million. Doesn't mean that NFTs are dead. It just means that, you're not going to buy a monkey with jewelry that you could take a picture of and resell it tomorrow for $1 million more. I personally think that the NFTs are going to be the future, not necessarily for buying monkeys and elephants online, but your airline ticket, for example, is an NFT, right? And this is all based on the blockchain technology, which I've always said that I don't think the future is Bitcoin, even though I love the idea behind Bitcoin. I just don't think the governments are going to release control of the financial system because that's how they control us all, right? They're not just going to let go of that control. But NFTs being based on blockchain, they used, for example, blockchain to do a real estate transaction in the US. And you can buy NFTs with dollars, for example, too, right? So NFTs aren't going away. It's just they're probably going to be used a little bit differently than most realize. Colombia is one of the countries that has the biggest interest in investing in Bitcoin. They've seen a 22.3% interest increase in the number of Colombians that want to see their first investment in Bitcoin over this year, representing just 5.2% before, 22.3% now. I think I kind of derailed or said that a little bit backwards, so let me know if that didn't make sense. Bitcoin is also higher for the week, up 6.16%, just under 42,000. It's still down just over 4.5% this year so far, which obviously for Bitcoin, that's like an hour of movement, right? And it's down 18% year over year. Commodities, Biden officially confirms that food shortages are coming, quote, "It is real," he said.
With regard to food shortage, yes, we did talk about food shortages. And it's going to be real.
Unquote. There's also a rail company in Canada that transports 70% of the potash produced in North America from all the mines in Canada through Canada into North America. So this is really important due to the fact that, remember that we had this problem with fertilizer due to the war in Ukraine and also Russia. Ukraine and Russia both considered the bread baskets, more Ukraine than Russia, the breadbasket of Europe and, in certain extent, breadbasket of the world. Now, Russia and the Ukraine provide a very big percentage of not the materials, but the ingredients that go into the fertilizer. And now we have a situation where the rail company that transports 70% of part of the fertilizer in North America, they're going to go on strike. So now we have other problems on top of the ones that we already have in regards to growing food. And remember that the UN reported last week that they still expect the price of food to go up by over 22% this coming year as well. And just to give you an example of how this works, for example, Brazil imports 24% of its fertilizer from Russia. So if the price of the fertilizer is exploding, that means that, for example, Brazil is the largest producer of coffee in the world. So what's that going to do for the price of coffee? It's going to explode. Now, you might not be a coffee drinker, but obviously you need fertilizer for everything. So keep that in mind. The preppers were right. Qatar's foreign minister is also stating that the conflict in Ukraine and overall geopolitical ramifications have left a lot of countries exploring new ways to price oil, bypassing the US dollar. If you don't understand why the United States is the preeminent world power in the world, it's because the United States made an agreement with Saudi Arabia, which is one of the biggest producers of oil in the world, to sell their oil only in dollars. So everybody in the world, no matter what, needs to buy dollars to buy their oil. This creates a huge demand for dollars, which is the reason why the US government, let's say, could get away with not running the budget the way they should. But now we have a situation where more and more countries are looking to bypass that, as it was reported last week that Saudi Arabia is looking to make the prices of their oil in yuan, which is the Chinese currency. So if this continues to happen with more and more countries, remember that China is the biggest importer of oil in the world. Just recently it was reported as well that India and Russia are looking for a direct payment system with each other, meaning that they want to buy, for example, oil in rubles or in rupee, which are their local currencies rather than dollars. This is going to create a huge glut of dollars in the world because people aren't going to need them anymore. And as most things, just simple economics, whenever the world is flush with dollars, meaning more supply, when there's a lot of something on the market, what happens to the value of that something? It collapses in price. And that's why 97% of the value of the dollar has been lost since 1900 or so. And if I'm not mistaken, since 2000, we've lost about, I think it was 60% of our purchasing power. And it's going to get even worse because now people are looking to bypass the dollar, right? So there's not going to be as much demand for the dollar, which means that the cost of everything for you and I that is in dollars, which is essentially the whole world, is going to skyrocket. Not bueno. The preppers were right. The EU is currently receiving 40% of its natural gas via Russian pipelines, several of which go through Ukraine. Germany, which is the largest economy in the European Union, fourth largest in the world, is urging companies to start preparing for rationing or natural gas shutdowns, as even diesel is becoming scarce. So now the third largest exporter in the world is probably going to have disruptions in their economy and their transportation due to the fact that we're having the situation with Ukraine. Not bueno. The preppers were right. The last straw for the USD, over 65% of processed neon gas used to power lasers to make semiconductors come from the Ukraine, and anywhere between 35 to 50%, depending on the material, of strategic metals like titanium and aluminum that are used in aircraft. For example, Boeing and Airbus come from Russia, and much of the grain that feeds places like the Middle East and Africa either come from Ukraine and Russia. So I don't think that the governments around the world are thinking this through very well, due to the fact that most of the stuff that we need comes from Russia and the Ukraine. So imagine what's going to happen. And this is in a much larger picture. This was really started by the United States. In 2014, the United States initiated a coup in Ukraine, put the president that was US friendly, and then now they're starting to poke the bear meaning Russia, by saying that Ukraine is going to join NATO. And really all they had to do was just leave Ukraine alone, right? That's all I had to do. So this is really a problem that was started by the US, which, who knows who's running the government that literally wants war, because I don't think Russia is the kind of country that we want to deal with, because they even have hypersonic missiles that we don't even have that type of technology yet to keep up with theirs. So it kind of makes you wonder about things, doesn't it? Crude prices settled up more than 7% on Monday after the EU disagreed whether to join the US in the Russian oil embargo, because obviously they're so reliant on Russian energy. We got to save the environment. Friday, Aramco facility in the Saudi city of Jeddah was exploded by a missile from the Iran-backed Houthi group that came from Yemen. And overall for the week, US crude went up 8.71%, settled at about $114, just shy of that. And international Brent, which is oil priced in the international price, which is called Brent, went up almost 12%, closed at just over $120. Year over year, both United States crude and international crude have gone up over 80% in the last year. Year over year, meaning March 2022 to March 2021. Precious metals are also higher this week. Gold went up 1.89% to $1,959, while silver went up 2.19% to $25.63. In financial and banking news, even the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, is warning countries may cut dollar reserves in response to the sanctions against Russia. A lot of countries now are saying, wait a minute, if US can do that to just countries they don't like what they're doing, maybe we shouldn't rely on them as much. And this is part of why I explained last week, where the US is literally pushing all of these countries to form an economic bloc that isn't reliant on the US anymore. For example, Russian banks, which 71% of the payment systems of Visa and MasterCard were dropped because they just stopped doing business in Russia. Well, now Russia's using the Union Pay system, which is based on China. So we're kind of creating a multipolar war. And I think this is really going to be the mistake of our generation. Because like I mentioned before, the reason why we have this debacle in Ukraine is because the US simply wanted to go in and start controlling things in Ukraine, which we shouldn't have done that. China's one-year loan prime rate was kept unchanged at 3.7% on Monday, even though investors and analysts were expecting it to increase, obviously because of the inflation. The average U.S. 30-year mortgage rate headed significantly higher on Friday. It's risen at 24 basis points to 4.95%, and it's risen 164 basis points from a year ago. That puts it on par for the worst week since the 2013 taper tantrum. And obviously, remember that the majority of the economy in the US especially is consumer spending. So if rates rise, mortgages go up, there's less movement in the housing or construction industry, for example, which is 17.5% of the US economy. That's a significant hit to the economy. So as the interest rates continue to go up, that's extremely detrimental to the US economy and obviously the world economy as well. UK inflation was reported at 6.2% on February, the highest since 1992. The UK government is now giving stimulus checks essentially to be able to help people with their food and energy costs. Again, consumer prices, most industrialized nations in the world is based on consumer prices. Every country except a lot of the countries in Africa and a few of the countries in Asia, everyone else is basically reliant on consumer spending. So if you as a consumer, you're having to pay 2-3 times as much when you go to buy food at the store, you're having to buy 2-3 times as much in gas prices as well, and all of your check and your money is going in the increased cost of living, you don't have any extra money to spend for food for food obviously, but for everything else. And so that obviously affects the economy quite a bit, because even in the US, it's almost 70% consumer spending that what the economy is based on. German producer prices, record jump of 25.9%. Germany being the 4th largest economy in the world, the 3rd largest exporter in the world, as their energy prices have skyrocketed to 68% since February 2021. Energy is a big source of income for the federal government in Russia. 43% of their budget is based on the sale of fossil fuels. So remember, while they're placing sanctions on Russia, but we're still buying their oil, that means that we're really not making a dent on the financing of the war that they're doing in Ukraine. Just keep that in mind when they talk about sanctions, when at the end of the day, it's not really doing anything at all. Goldman Sachs is raising their treasury yield expectations as the Fed will continue to raise interest rates more rapidly due to inflation. This is again a significant danger to the economy, as the economy is continuing to get not slower, but as it's continuing to get weaker and it's not growing as fast, we're literally going to have a stagnant economy while inflation is through the roof, which has been one of the worst periods. If I'm not mistaken, the 70s or 80s was one of the worst periods in economic history because of the stagflation, meaning a stagnant economy and very high inflation. Political news. Thursday, former President Trump sued former president candidate Hillary Clinton and ex-British spy Christopher Steele. They're saying that those two, including 30 others, carried a plot to create a false narrative that Trump was colluding with Russian actors. In economic news, there's a forecast that was published by the S&P Global Market Intelligence that due to Western sanctions, the Russian economy was going to plummet 22% in 2022. They're also slashing the world economic growth forecast by almost 1% as well, because obviously if the prices of everything is going up, you're not going to have money to be able to spend on other things. Business activity in Germany is going to dip in March as well. This due to the situation with inflation, in addition to the war in Ukraine. A lot of analysts have actually stated that Europe was going to be one of the worst hit due to the effects of the war in Ukraine. Obviously, we now have that situation with diesel and gas shortages as well. And the U.S. pending sales, which measures the signed contracts on existing homes, went down 4.1% from February. Passing from January, meaning from January to February, it dropped that much. And sales overall were down 5.4% compared to February 2021. 4th straight month of declines in pending sales. And remember that housing market, construction, sales, everything is 17.5% of the economy. So if it's going down, let's say 5% a month, it's a big chunk of the economy again. Corporate news. Arms manufacturer and German automotive giant Rheinmetall surged over 9.38% to an all-time high as Germany continues to increase its defense spending. Good news on Tesla as their shares soared almost 8% on Tuesday when they opened their gigafactory in Berlin. I don't know if you guys have seen Elon Musk dance, but he definitely is not a good dancer. Thankfully, his talents went to his brain and not his dancing skills. They're officially opening in the Gigafactory in Berlin, and they want to sell 500,000 vehicles a year. Even ARK Invest, which is run by the influential Cathie Wood, expects Tesla shares to reach $3,000 by 2025. And Tencent, which is the Facebook of China, dropped 5.91% in Hong Kong on Wednesday after China has continued to add even more regulations. They, over the last year, have just literally passed more and more regulations without even notifying anybody. And a lot of people are wondering that if the Chinese government is more interested in power rather than profit due to the fact that they're literally single-handedly taking out their huge tech giants one by one. Berkshire Hathaway is buying an insurance company called Allegheny for $11.6 billion in cash. It's about 1.26 times the book value that they have there at Allegheny. And also on Friday, the U.S. stated in trade news that it's going to work with partners to be able to provide 15 billion cubic meters of liquefied natural gas to Europe to try to end the bloc's dependence on Russian energy exports, obviously due to the situation in Ukraine. So notice we can sanction them all we want, but we're still giving them money. Even the U.S. is paying Russia for their oil, which is just the biggest form of irony that I can think of. In investment news, Larry Fink, which is the CEO and chairman of the world's biggest asset manager, BlackRock, the firm sees over $10 trillion in management, is saying that the world order is being upended. The one that has been in place since the end of the Cold War in the 1990s. A lot of nations and governments are looking to, they said, essentially launch an economic war against Russia. And these also stated that they're going to remove a lot of the purchases of their Russian securities in addition to their index portfolios as well. There was a not huge, but there was a pretty significant airplane crash in a Boeing 737 in China. Unfortunately, 132 people were on board, which passed away. Boeing fell 7% in the pre-market. And I don't know if you guys have noticed that there's been a lot more plane crashes recently than before. Have you guys noticed that? It seems like there's been more accidents than usual. Singapore officially to reopen borders and drop the outdoor mask mandate. As long as you are vaccinated, fully vaccinated, and non-vaccinated children under 12 years old are going to be able to enter Singapore. It's an amazing place. Highly recommend you go in your lifetime. And international news, according to a local poll by the Research Institute, 90% of Ukrainians believe that they're going to win the war against Russia. Most don't realize that Russia actually sent their old equipment to Russia. They even haven't sent their top-notch guys just yet. The UN is now reporting that there's been 10 million Ukrainians that they've fled their homes. 3.3 million have left the country, and the rest are still within the borders, but they have left their homes. In unusual facts this week, solar storm is expected to hit Earth on Monday, March 28th. This is what causes those famous aurora borealis, the fluorescent lights that appear near the poles. What happens is that the particles from the sun, essentially, think of it like a solar storm, like a flare, hits our magnetic what's the best way to phrase it? The magnetic field, essentially, of the Earth, and then that's what creates those beautiful colors. That's the week. Good. That's the good news for the week, guys. Let me know if you guys have any questions. Don't forget to hit like. We'll see you next week. Bye.